Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our update on Israel with our CWB scholar, Avi Ben-Hur. As we convene today, it is with heavy hearts and a sense of urgency that we address the ever-evolving dynamics of the war in Israel. Over the past few weeks, the region has witnessed a series of developments that have the potential to reshape the course of this long-standing complex conflict. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, my name is Ellen Resnick, and I'm the Educational Programs and Outreach Manager at Classrooms Without Borders. Our objective today is to provide you with an overview of the most recent events, their implications, and the international response, with a focus on promoting understanding and dialogue, as well as, of course, a set of resources that you can use to engage in conversations with your community. We understand that this is a deeply sensitive and multifaceted issue, and we aim to facilitate a respectful and informative discussion. I would like to introduce today's scholar, Avi Ben-Hur, our scholar in residence, who is transmitting from Jerusalem. As our scholar in residence, Avi has lectured, taught, and facilitated workshops in the United States, Warsaw, Prague, Berlin, and Greece. As a guide, Avi has specialized in working with organizations focusing in on political issues, interfaith programs, and Holocaust studies. Your input throughout today's event is essential, so please feel free to participate in the discussion during our Q&A sessions by dropping your questions into the chat directly to Avi. And with that, Avi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Welcome, everybody. For those who are not aware of it, I'm broadcasting to you from Jerusalem in Israel, and it's 9:05 in the evening here. I'm going to apologize ahead of time if my dog, who is about 10 yards away from me, is going to be barking here. I don't have control over that. Or my kids who might be barking as well. I don't have control over that. I actually have no control of anything in my house, but that has nothing to do with the war. Okay, so what I would like to do first is I want to share something with you. I'm going to do a share screen. And I'm doing this kind of almost like a public service. I want to share with you a very good website, and it should be popping up on your screens momentarily, probably around now. This is known as the Institute for National Security Studies. It is a centrist think tank that is attached to Tel Aviv University. And every day, what you have specifically in front of you is kind of an update, real-time updates of what's going on. And later on, towards the end, we're going to drop this link into the chat so you can do it. We don't want you to do it now because then you'll be looking at this and not listening to me, which is fine, but that's the kind of defeats the purpose of this. But you just take a look and you can see here, and this is updated as of 2 this afternoon. So we've already had 7,512 rockets shot at Israel. And I think that's something that's probably not so much in your news feed. Obviously here it is, or it's in our, run for a shelter. So it's something that's in people's consciousness. Just so you know, what is not reflected in this, because it happened like, 2-3 hours ago, Hamas actually succeeded in shooting a missile to Haifa and another one to Eilat. That is demonstrating, and then they fell in open spaces. Nobody got harmed, but it's demonstrating two things. First of all, letting Israel know that they have very long-range rockets, and they have them in general, and they still have them at this moment, and they still have the capacity with everything we're doing to shoot at us. That's important to say. Please note, 360,000 reservists were called up. That's not 100% of the reservists that we have in Israel, but something like 150% showed up. That may sound like a crazy number. What it means is people some of whom are not even in the IDF's manpower anymore, showed up to serve. And I know something like that. So 360,000 reservists is a lot. And I just want to put this in brackets. It means that 360,000, in this case, mostly, but not exclusively, men, who are civilians, okay, they're not in the standing army, are not at work. That's a lot of people in a country of 9.8 million. That's a very young, has a very young population. So that means that this, what I'm intimating right now, which is true historically in Israel. If you think about, for example, the Yom Kippur War, when you have a general call up the reserves, and this was not a general, but this is a very large call up, it impacts the economy negatively. The longer the reservists are there, the worse the economy is impacted, and it's happening as we speak. You can see that we have 220 hostages or captives as far as we know. Here it's saying that 125,000 displaced Israelis. I've seen other statistics saying 200,000. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down just so you understand what it is that we're talking about over here. Okay, what you see, kind of both sides. On the left, you're seeing the northern border with Lebanon, where all the green dots are communities. Probably many of you have visited them. For example, Metula is an example, which is, you see where my cursor is. This is where Metula is, the northernmost community. This is the Israeli-Lebanese border that I'm tracing now with the cursor, which hopefully you can see. Might be a little bit of a delay here. Tens of thousands of Israelis have been evacuated from the northern border. And to look on the right-hand side, obviously, most of the residents, actually all the residents except those who refuse to do so, have been evacuated from the Gaza envelope in this area. And so, yeah, it's somewhere between 125 and 200,000 people are now displaced. They're not refugees, okay? And a lot of people are putting them up in their homes, and hotels are putting them up. But this is another aspect that I'm not sure that is on your radar. In any event, we're going to drop this. There's a lot more in this. I'm giving you just a teaser here, but I wanted to give you a sense. There's somewhere you can actually get updated from an Israeli source in English. You're seeing it, which is a reputable source, a very good one. And they also have very good articles here, analysis. So I'm just sharing this with you, as I said, let's call it a public service. So I'm taking this down now. And Ellen will send it, Ellen or Jackie or Erica, somebody will send it in the chat later on. And I want to share with you a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I want to say something that I think is very, very important. I hope very much that most of you have not been looking at the videos, the films that were put out, by the way, by Hamas about their atrocities. I'll share with you, since the beginning of this, have not looked at a single one, nary a single one. Intuitively, knowing myself, I thought this is not a good thing for me to do. I shouldn't be seeing this. Now, there's a lot of talk in Israel about not looking at the videos, that Israel should look at it. Person I can tell you, I have issues with my kids, the teens, and they're looking at it, and that's very worrying for me. So there are two aspects to not looking at the visuals. The first is, I'm speaking now as somebody who lives in Israel, as an Israeli. This happened in our backyard, and many of us know people this happened to, including myself, and it is not good for our souls. The second reason, and this is no less important, is that Hamas deliberately filmed these atrocities as part of their psychological warfare against us to terrorize us. And I'm going to talk more about that later on. Okay, so Israelis should not be looking at them because we're falling into the trap. We're letting Hamas manipulate us. And anyway, so my point is, I'm not going to show you, certainly I'm not showing you any atrocities. Okay, and I'll be really minimizing the visuals I'm going to be using. And I'll be mostly be a talking head. So I think it's not great for Zoom. And I apologize ahead of time. What I will do is I'll be stopping every few minutes to take questions that hopefully will be sending into the chat that relate to things that I'm talking about. So what do you have in front of you right now? This is actually not up to date, but it was the best I could find. And it's a map that is showing us levels of support or condemnation of Israel, okay, or support of Hamas. And again, it's not up to date, but I want you to take a look at the picture because it's not completely skewed. So what you can see here, for example, is that the dark blue color supports Israel. So you see Canada and the United States. Okay, what you're seeing in South America is not correct. The big country on the eastern side there is Brazil, and Brazil is actually is kind of like a light blue. I think they're more like condemning all violence and they're leaning towards condemning Israel. Below it is the country my wife was born in, Argentina, and Argentina still is supporting Israel. Please note, the orange color condemns Israel. So what are those countries you see there on the northwestern part of South America? I'm not doing a geography test for you. It's Venezuela and Colombia. These two great, human rights advocates. And above it, I think we're looking at Cuba, another great human rights advocate. So there you can see that they are condemning Israel. The red colors you can see on the map support Hamas. So what you're seeing in North Africa there, and it's the only country in North Africa actually, is Algeria. To the left of it, west of it, is Morocco. Morocco's been condemning all the violence, but it's not condemned Israel specifically. You can see, of course, just north of Israel, Lebanon and Syria are supporting Hamas, theoretically. And you can see Iraq, and you can see Iran. And of course, if you look at the eastern part of this map, right-hand side, the orange color condemning Israel, North Korea, of course, as you can imagine. Now, what's missing on this, of course, is the fact that Russia has also been stepping up to condemn Israel, and Turkey, where it says here condemns all violence, has actually condemned Israel. Just FYI, our good friend, our meaning American and Israeli good friend Erdogan, has said that Hamas is a freedom fighter, legitimate group, okay, and Israel is committing genocide. So, surprise, surprise, it's not a surprise for any of us. It's important to note, and here you know this, but I want to say it now from an Israeli perspective, what President Biden has said and done has been very warmly and dramatically received in Israel. I'm originally from Brooklyn, so we would say, you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Well, the answer is he's talking the talk and walking the walk, because even before he came to talk, he already sent a carrier force, and immediately within 48 hours, we had a large shipments of ammunition. Up till yesterday, something like 62 planes have landed in Israel, the United States, with ammunition and spare parts. So the United States has been hugely supportive of Israel here, dramatically so, and that's how it's received in Israel. The truth is that Germany has also stepped up to the plate, not just in terms of political support, but Germany is also supplying some military support. There are also German warships they're in the area to our benefit. You're going to be surprised about this. Some of you, I think. The Czech Republic sent us several thousand of vests with bulletproof Kevlar plates, because we were missing. We called up so many people, we didn't have enough for everybody. That's the Czech Republic. It's very interesting, right? It's like, that's interesting. Okay, US, okay. Germany, all right. Germany, all right. But the Czechs, okay. UK, France, Italy have all come out very, very strongly, and their prime ministers have all visited Israel, have come out very strongly in support of Israel, declaratively, politically. It took the EU some time, but also the EU has stepped up to the plate as well. As I said before, Russia, those great humanitarians condemned us, and then they condemn all the violence, and they're condemning the West, and this is all a Western conspiracy, and so on and so forth. And the Chinese are sitting on the fence. They don't really care one way or the other. So I thought I'd just share this with you. Now, this is important, I think, because many of you, most of you, I assume, are American, right? I shouldn't assume anything. I'm very, very well aware of the fact that at the same time that the US government, please let me just say something else, 97 senators out of 100, okay, openly supported Israel. You can take a guess who's the one who came out against. Okay, or he abstained, one of the two. The majority of the congressmen and women also supported Israel. So the U.S. government, the U.S. administration are really supporting Israel in a big way. And I want to share something else with you. This is a poll that came out, I guess now it's a week ago, and it's showing that 76% of U.S. voters, okay, I think that supporting Israel's national is in the United States' national interest, as opposed to 17% who don't. Here's a breakdown between Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Okay, and you also see that 64% of voters across the board approve the U.S. sending weapons and military equipment to Israel in response. Okay, and here, when voters were asked about the sympathies, they lie more with Israelis or the Palestinians. Okay, 6 out of 10, 61% for the Israelis and 30% for the Palestinians. And in terms of who was responsible for the outbreak, 72% said Hamas and 10% said Israel. So I'm saying this to you because I'm aware of the rise of anti-Semitism, and it's a global phenomenon, but it's happening in the United States as well. So there seems to be a dissonance between, and I'll be honest, I didn't show the entire public opinion poll because it also breaks down by age, and the younger people are much more critical of Israel, or maybe post-Israel, or don't know it all. It's most older generation that is coming out very strongly pro-Israel, generally speaking here. But there seems to be some dissonance between the behavior, things that we're seeing globally. And here I'm showing you a photo. This is a pro-Palestinian protest in Warsaw. Now, I have to stop and say the following. Those who don't know this, Poland has pretty good relations with Israel. Pretty good relations. And there's no love, Poland has no love for radical Islamists and terrorists, Islamic terrorists, for sure. But here you have, but it's a democracy, and here you have this demonstration. And I think what's very important here is the lady who evidently was identified as Norwegian, the blonde lady in the center, keep the world clean, and we're talking about throwing the Jews into the garbage, or Star David. This is reeking of something. This is in Warsaw. This is reeking of something that's not just anti-Israel. Okay, and it doesn't stop over here. This is a photo from October 13th, Columbus, Ohio. Those of you who are in Pittsburgh, it ain't that far as I remember. Okay, and let's stop and focus on the sign from the river to the sea. This slogan, from the river to the sea, means one thing. It means the elimination of the state of Israel, because the river is the Jordan River and the sea is the Mediterranean Sea. This sign doesn't say we're for a two-state solution. This sign says we're for the elimination of the Jewish democratic state of Israel. That is it's not a code. This is what it means, and it's unequivocal. It's not something one has to. It's not complex. It's very clear cut, and this is what we're seeing here in Columbus, Ohio. Of course, there are a lot of issues on campuses, and you're probably aware of that. I think that one of the big deals, very interesting, that's happening now, that as far as I don't recall this happening in the past, but I could be wrong, is that there's been a dramatic pushback against campus policy by donors and alumni, many of whom are Jews and many of whom are not Jews, who think it's just absolutely disgusting, okay, that either the universities themselves, Ivy League, are allowing their professors and student bodies to say things that are basically genocidal against Jews and Israelis. Well, they themselves have been very, very wishy-washy in terms of their response to the atrocities of October 7th. And there's an interesting pushback because it appears to be getting some traction with some of the Ivy Leagues, because they're losing funding and they're getting a lot of criticism. And I think it's important, and I think it's interesting, because I can't recall something like this happening in the past, but I could be wrong. I know that the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, published today, I think, that in the last 3 weeks of this conflict, we're now 3 weeks into it, almost. Is that correct? Yes, we're 3 weeks into it, a little bit less. little less, 2.5 weeks into it, anti-Semitism has risen 21% in the United States. Okay, so and that's the U.S. Now I want to share something with you. My eldest is an exchange student in the University of Seville, doing a semester abroad, and 3 days into this, fellow student of his walked into the classroom with his pro-Palestinian shirt. This is a photo that he took in the classroom. Now, you have to understand something. I want to clarify because for a lot of people, probably the timeline has gotten a bit fuzzy for you. The attack broke out at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday, October 7th, Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It took the Israeli security establishment, that means the IDF and the Shin Bet and everything, and the police, 3 full days to retake the 22 Israeli Jewish communities that were overrun with terrorists, because terrorists, a lot of them were still there. They were holding people captives in their homes. You had firefights taking place inside of Israel. In other words, until the 10th, Israel didn't do any offensive action. We weren't bombing inside the Gaza Strip, and no troops were there. We're expending all of energies trying to clear out the terrorists who were still embedded in Israeli Jewish communities in the south. So this guy, before Israel had taken even one offensive step, was walking with his pro-Palestinian shirt. My son wrote a letter to the official in the school and never got a response. He said, "I don't feel safe in this classroom. I'm Israeli. I'm all for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, speech, but I'm not for incitement, and this can turn into violence." And he never got a response. He sent me today this one. This is a poster in the same university, and he translated it for me. Okay, so top it says solidarity with the poor Palestinians, and it says stop the genocide in Gaza. Student strike, October 26th, and he's told me it's not just university, it's evidently it's national, it's all over the country. And the symbol you can see there, I have my cursor now encircling it, maybe a delay, hope you can see that. This symbol appears to be something, it's the symbol of the student council, which we call, as Americans, a student union or something like that, I guess. It exists that kind of animal on colleges and universities and states. So it's a student council, student union, and their image here is something borrowed from some kind of like communist or pro-communist organization. Anyway, this is in Spain, but I think that you're probably aware of the fact that we're seeing anti-Semitism. We're really seeing it all over. In North America, we're seeing it in Europe. And maybe worse, we're finding too many people who have kind of skipped over what took place on October 7th with the old whataboutism. So this is where we're at right now. On the one hand, we have solid support from very solid, important countries, starting with the United States of America and Germany. Macron yesterday suggested forming a multinational force to fight Hamas like one was formed to fight ISIS. That's incredible, meaning they would shoulder to shoulder with Israeli troops also fight against Hamas. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but it's an interesting proposal, and it says something dramatic. So yeah, we have that, but we're also seeing the rise of anti-Semitism. In the UK, last week, the Metropolitan Police of London stated that in the 2 weeks of the fighting, anti-Semitic events had risen 1,375%. That's like an insane, that's like an insane number. Okay. If there was one, that's crazy. So, and that's in London, right? Just London. So this is where we're at. It's on the campuses, it's in the streets. And I expect that as time goes on and more Palestinians die in Gaza, there's going to be more and more pressure from some of the countries that have stepped up to the plate. There'll be pressure by their constituents. we can ask a question now. I'm going to do it rhetorically. Why is it that the US, Germany, UK, France, Italy have been so stridently supportive of Israel? Aside from the obvious, what happened this time, and I think it's the first time, I'm going to talk more about this today. Hamas, as I said before, filmed its atrocities. Why, I'm going to tell you later on. But it's boomeranged against them to a certain extent. Because Israel, which traditionally doesn't air that kind of stuff, we don't do it. We don't do that in our newspapers and on the on TV news programs in Israel. I know it's done on others internationally. For the first time, I'm sure that President Biden and Blinken and Anthony saw these films, these atrocities. I know the journalists, foreign journalists, and some of them were throwing up. You can't. This is something that is, and this is stuff that Hamas filmed. So this is kind of, unequivocal. There's anybody who is decent and reasonable and sees this, there's nothing complicated about this. If anybody's reasonable, decent, no complication here. And I'm sure all these leaders, one by one, who've arrived here, these prime ministers and US military who are coming here, they're all seeing this stuff. They're being shown these things. And therefore, they understand us. They understand us. They're also trying to rein us in to a certain extent in terms of collateral damage. We're going to talk about that. Okay, and you have the issue of the captives. We're going to talk about that as well. But I personally believe that the fact that they have seen these atrocities with their own eyes, filmed, has had dramatic impact on some of these world leaders. That's my view of it. I'm going to stop now to look in the chat section and see what questions some of you all have sent to me. Okay, so Jane has asked two questions. Are there food shortages in Israel now? To my knowledge, there are no food shortages in Israel right now. We have a shortage of bottled water. And I'll talk about that a little later on. I'll just, because you asked the question, I'll explain. The Home Front Command made an error about a week and a half ago, where they told the Israeli citizens to stock up on water. And it caused a run on people buying mineral water. And the assumption, it was a mistake. And the assumption was that we may have to hunker down in our fortified safe spaces, particularly if Hezbollah enters the fray. And so still, I can tell you my local grocery doesn't have bottled water. Personally, I already had a lot of bottled water because we also have something deal with earthquakes here, and I try to be prepared for stuff like that. But we have to stock up on bottled water. That's the only thing that's there's been a bit of a shortage on that, but there's been no food shortages aside from that, to my knowledge. So how many aid trucks are coming into Gaza before October 7th? A lot. Okay, it's not one number. The number was changing. It was several hundreds. The trucks were coming through Israel, and in principle, Israel was checking to ensure that stuff that Hamas was not supposed to be getting wasn't going through. As you probably know, they have lots and lots of tunnels there. Gaza is completely built on sand dunes, and we estimate there are 500 miles of tunnels. 500 miles of tunnels. There's an entire metropolis under the ground, including smuggling tunnels. And there's a big smuggling industry going on from the Sinai Peninsula, which is under Egyptian control, into the Gaza Strip, which is probably how they managed to get their hands on so many projectiles, missiles, rockets, and so on and so forth. Okay. Yes, South Africa is supportive of Hamas. That's correct, Ronnie. Okay, I'm being asked what do I predict the plan for the day after, and what will happen. This is I'm going to be talking about this in a later section. So, great question. Try to curb your enthusiasm for just a few more minutes because I'm going to get to it. I'm going to attempt to get to it. Okay, so those are the questions we have for now. Thank you. I'm going to continue to our next issue. Okay, so I'm putting back up my the PowerPoint. So please bear with for a moment. So Israeli society right now is still very much in shock. And there's been, you can only frame it this way, there's been a rupture between the Israeli citizenry and the Israeli government and the Israeli defense establishment. A terrible rupture. Probably don't have to remind you, but I'll say it anyway. Israel, from day one, the last 75 years, has been a country surrounded by enemy states, and having a functional and competent government and having a good security establishment has been basically the guarantee of Israel's existence. And what we have seen, what we saw between October 7th and October 10th was a dysfunctional security establishment that made huge errors, because it's not just about the intelligence fiasco, and it's not just about the whole defensive system, what it was based upon. It was also the response and the time of the response, and that's also part and parcel of this story. You had Israeli Jewish communities that for hours were under siege with hundreds of terrorists, each one under hundreds of terrorists. Folks, you have to understand, we estimate today that at least 2,500 terrorists entered into Israel in one fell swoop. That is an insane number of terrorists. And they killed, now 1,400 people. And it took the army a very long time to get their act together. 3 days is way too long. So the rupture between Israeli society and the security establishment, which is applying a lot of pressure on the Israeli security establishment to bring the goods, to deliver the goods. But it appears as though after those first 3 days, the Israeli army got its act together, as did the Shin Bet and the police, and functioning very, very well. But the proof is still in the pudding. What I just told you now is not the case regarding the government. The government has basically been incompetent and dysfunctional from day one until this very moment. Essentially, what's happened here is that civil society replaced the government. It's insane. The protest movements that were functioning here for the last 10 months literally spun on a dime, and within hours used their organizational skills that they'd honed for the last 10 months to beginning to evacuate people. You had some of these organizations going down, civilians, some of them unarmed, with their vehicles, evacuating before the military or the police got down there, bringing them clothes, bringing them food, putting them up. Civil society at large has really stepped up to the plate in every way, shape, and form, and the government hasn't. The government hasn't. And when you have a lot of people evacuated, you have huge damage that has been done to civilian property. A lot of the communities in the South were burnt. The homes were destroyed, burnt deliberately. They had the time. And, it's not the first war we fought, and it's not the first war where there's been destruction. So there are, the government has a precedent in terms of dealing with these issues. How do you deal with the civilian population in terms of compensation, in terms of all these things? It's been a big, big mess. It's been a big, big mess. all of the polls that have been taken, including the last 2-3 days, have shown that the overwhelming majority of Israelis have no faith in the government. The last poll, which was like 3 days ago, said 80% of Israelis don't want Netanyahu as prime minister. And by the way, it includes a majority of his party members that voted for him. Okay, so it needs to be said very, very clearly. That's the public vibe right now, it's not looking good. There's no good reason why the government is not functioning properly, and it's very, very disturbing for a lot of people. So this is something that has to be kept in mind. What you can see in front of you over here are two photos actually, and these two photos are showing you something that I suspect that some of you either know about this place or visited it. There's a kibbutz that is just south of Ashkelon, okay, a little bit inland, very close to the Gaza envelope, and in fact, they fought off terrorists. The kibbutz, which was founded in 1943, was named after Mordechai Malevich, who was one of the main commanders of the Warsaw Gate Uprising, who fell fighting in 1943. The name of the kibbutz is Kibbutz Yad Mordechai. Yad means a monument to. So it's a monument to. The kibbutz name is the kibbutz. There's a monument to, or a commemoration of, Mordechai Malevich. And in this kibbutz, there is a very interesting Holocaust museum. And in the museum, it actually has, to scale, a reconstruction of Mila 18. Some of you are familiar with that novel, Leon Uris, which is kind of it's romanticized. It's an historical novel. It's romanticized. It's about, Mila 18 was where the command bunker was in the Warsaw Gate Uprising, and where Mordechai Malevich blew himself up as the Nazis were breaking in. Okay, Hamas 2 days ago shot rockets and hit the museum, and also damaged the reconstructed command bunker. Guys, this is not luck. What you're seeing here is not luck. This is very, very deliberate. And what it is showing us and showing you is that Hamas knows Israeli Jewish society very, very well. They know us very, very well. In and out. Unfortunately, we evidently did not know them very well. But they know what our deepest fears are. They know who we are psychologically, and they are playing this to the hilt. They're using psychological warfare very, very effectively. Very effectively. And so you're probably aware of the fact that up to this moment, 4 hostages have been released. The first 2 were American Jewish women, mother and daughter, who are not dual nationals. They're not Israeli, they're American. And the other 2 were 2 elderly Israeli women who, are, as far as I know, are not dual nationals. One 85-year-old, the other one 79-year-old. And the 85-year-old, who was interviewed on TV, was saying how the captors treated her so well. I said, that's interesting. Her husband is still in captivity. You understand how Hamas is playing this? They're playing it to the bone. They know us very, very well. So Israeli society right now, it's not just that there is a rupture with the government and a rupture with the defense establishment. For the first time in, I'll have to say it's almost decades, people's personal security has been dramatically undermined. And people here are not talking about a 9/11 moment, and they're not talking about the Yom Kippur War anymore. The terminology here is, we're back to 1948. We're in an existential war. And the terminology is also, some people, and there's a lot of pushback against that, is how to define the acts of October 7th to 10th, pogrom, Holocaust. I mean, is a kind of debate, a public debate about that. But now I want to sidestep into something else, which I think is very, very important for you to be aware of. Okay, because this is something that is very dangerous and very problematic. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there are some 2 million Arab citizens of the state of Israel. They constitute around 20% of the overall citizenry of the state of Israel. The big picture is that Israeli Arabs, the big picture, the overwhelming majority, have behaved in exemplary fashion in the last 2.5 weeks. That's the big picture. Number one. Number two, there have been some rotten apples that came out promoting Hamas. Some of them students, universities, Israeli universities. Pretty prominent actress, Israeli Arab actress. There have some of the victims of Hamas's massacre were Arabs, were Israeli Arabs. I know of at least 5 Bedouin who were murdered by them. And we also know of several stories of Israeli Arab Bedouin who heroically risked their lives to save the people under fire. There's a bus driver who got 15 people out. He was unarmed, and we've had that as well. So this is something that is important to say. Okay. Having said that, it's more complicated. It's more complicated, and I know this personally. So, for example, a good friend of mine had what he thought was a very close Palestinian friend who was Israeli, and he helped him out a lot. And as soon as this happened, he started to put up on Facebook a lot of pro-Hamas stuff, and it's just like it just threw my friend over a cliff. My wife's a clinical psychologist, and she works. Some of her peers are Arabs, and the conversation has also been complicated and a bit strange. I have Palestinian students who are not Israeli citizens in East Jerusalem, who are trained as guides, and 2 of them have immediately, either by phone or by WhatsApp, wrote to me things like, "I don't have the words to tell you how horrified I am." This guy who's a devout Muslim, the guy that I trained, not a citizen of Israel, he's from East Jerusalem. So you have a very, 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 very much a mixed bag. And the real fear is, across the board, that this can blow up either during or afterwards. It has to be said, honestly, that the Minister of Public Security, who is neo-Kahanist, okay, Americana was his rabbi. I'm talking about Itamar Ben-Gvir. Like 3-4 days into this, said we have to do an operation against Israeli Arabs, and it's like, why are you stirring up trouble? Like, what they're behaving themselves. What are you talking about, right? So and other people in the government came down on him, but it's volatile, and however this turns out in the end, it's probably not gonna be very good news for Israeli Arabs, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority have behaved in exemplary fashion. I'm going to stop here and look at the questions that have come in the meantime. So the questions about Hamas and Mossad, the last piece I'm talking about where we're at, what are our options and what's happening with there. Okay, did the refusal of protesting reservists to report for training compromise Israeli readiness for October 7th? The question from Carol. No, absolutely not. Look, it's very, very clear that the Israeli policy, which by the way was not instituted or begun by the present government, but was instituted by Netanyahu in a previous government, okay, starting from 2015 actually, but not the present government. The entire policy and concept that was guiding the Israeli leadership vis-a-vis Hamas and the Gaza Strip was completely erroneous. That's first of all. And it has nothing to do with the protest the last 10 months. For example, the idea was we're going to let Qatari money in, and we're going to let 18 to 20,000 Gazans work in Israel, get permits, and 20,000 Gazans are receiving the kind of salary in Israel that is like 5 times what they get in Gaza. So it's 20,000 people really supporting 100,000 people. And the fact that we got money in and get people to fill their bellies, this is going to keep them. Hamas will be a partner in this. This is completely erroneous. We now know that some of the folks who came into work were actually spying, and we found on several of the dead terrorists literally plans of the kibbutz they got killed in, with the number of children in each house. I mean, it's on that level, and that had to be done by the laborers who came in. Okay, so that has nothing to do with the protests. It predates the present government and the previous government. It actually goes back to, let's say, to 2015, at least, okay, in terms of this policy under a different Netanyahu government. That's number one, okay? That's in terms of the government policy. In terms of the readiness of the IDF, the problem here was not the readiness. The problem here was the defense concept. First of all, the IDF also thought that Hamas was not interested. There's a complete intelligence failure. And intelligence failure has nothing to do with the 10 months of protests. The reservists in intelligence are not the people who are writing the intelligence reports, the people who are in the standing army. So there's nothing to do with that. It's a complete intelligence snafu, complete screw up, just like the Yom Kippur War. An over-reliance on technology, on high tech, undermanning the post. All of this has nothing to do with the processing reservists. And in fact, the moment this broke out, 100% of the processing reservists showed up for duty, including 100% of the pilots who are the best pilots in the country, those reserves, because they have more flight times and more bombing times than anybody else in the Air Force, and they're the ones who are leading the charge right now. It is simply not correct, 1,000% not correct, that the processing reserves have anything to do with our readiness. There are other issues involved here, including complacency and arrogance on our part. Folks, 2-3 days into this, a lot of Israeli pundits were saying, it's the Iranians. Why were they saying the Iranians? Because we so disparaged our enemy that we couldn't imagine they had the smarts, the intelligence, okay? You can add to this. When you disparage, when you have hubris and you disparage your enemy, this is what happens. It breeds complacency and laziness and sloppiness. And this is part and parcel of our big snafu, that we're eating it big time. And it's a partnership of the government and the entire security establishment, because it's not just the IDF, it's also the Shin Bet. Okay, so this is important to say it unequivocally. And by the way, this is it's not a political question so much, because there was a concept here. The government had a political concept that is not either with left or right, of what they thought Hamas was and what they thought Hamas wanted to do. Okay, and this is part of the problem here. Okay, Jim and Ordina are asking, is it possible the formation of the war cabinet will lead to more constructive action by the government? So I have no doubt that the founding of the so-called war cabinet should be for sure leading to constructive is interesting, the term you used. I would say more functional and more competent that particular aspect of the government. I want to say that, but it's not. I'm not sure that's entirely the case. Look, it's very, very clear that the United States is very involved now. I don't mean on the ground militarily, but also in consulting and giving advice to the government of Israel and also the military. Two U.S. generals who participated in urban warfare in Iraq in the last decade and a half were experts at it, either fighting ISIS or during the the Second Gulf War, whatever. I've been consulting and talking to the Israeli army, their peers, the Israeli army, and the president, all the secretaries who've been arriving here, okay, are kind of holding our hands because I don't think they trust this dysfunctional government, okay, and I'm not saying that they're restraining us by force or by threat, but without a doubt, the United States is trying to speak the language of don't let the rage now guide what you're going to do. Okay, cool heads have to guide what you're going to do, and you have to have an exit strategy. You have to have clear goals and an exit strategy. But I'm going to talk about this in my last piece. Okay. Okay, the same question about delaying the ground invasion. I'll talk about the last piece. How to respond to college students who criticize Israel not allowing water in. At this point, by the way, water is being allowed in. There's a humanitarian corridor. Stuff is going in. It's that this is not the case. The so-called complete siege that we laid on the Gaza Strip, I don't think we laid it on very long. And just giving my opinion now, I think that was a very wasn't a smart public declaration to make by our Minister of Defense, Gallant. It was more, I think, for internal Israeli public consumption, but it did a lot of damage for us internationally, and it wasn't a smart thing to say, in my opinion. Okay, and you can see the reaction to that. But no, water is getting in right now. Look, I cannot imagine it's the question about college kids. I cannot imagine any country on earth, whether democracy or whatever they are, I cannot imagine any country on earth after experiencing what we experienced on October 7th, which as President Biden called it, it was like 12 9/11s, proportionally speaking, in terms of numbers of Israelis massacred, okay, in one day compared to the Israeli population, okay, and it's not just the dead people, okay, the actual acts themselves were so gruesome, okay, that no country on earth would sit on their hands and not react. Okay, that's there is no for somebody thinks that there is pure justice in the world. I'm sorry, there isn't. There's no such animal. There's no such animal. And it simply doesn't work. Life doesn't work that way. That's not being blasé about this. People are suffering in Gaza. And the Gaza is suffering because of what Hamas did and is still doing. And Hamas shares 99% of the blame for this. We have to be careful and cautious, okay, not to be less what we are. We have to try the best we can to be as humane as we can. That's who we are. They're not. That's not who they are. Was Iron Dome able to intervene with the missiles sent to Haifa and Eilat? They didn't need to because they were falling in. They fell in open spaces. The way Iron Dome works, the way the algorithm works, is identifies in less than a second the trajectory of the incoming projectiles and can compute whether it's going to fall in open space or on industrial economic infrastructure or on civilians, and that's what informs whether or not it shoots it down. If it's not the missiles that Iron Dome use are so expensive We don't shoot them in every incoming missile. We only shoot them in incoming missiles that are endangering either human lives or economic industrial infrastructure. Okay, and in the case of Haifa and Eilat, they both fell in places that nobody was hurt because they fell in places where nobody was. Okay, Ronnie's asking that. I think Ronnie is a he. I'm not sure if Ronnie's a he or she. I'm going to guess Ronnie is a he. Ronnie is asking. I've seen the right wing in Israel is already blaming Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres for Oslo, Ariel Sharon for the withdrawal, the redeployment and withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and also blaming the protesters. Anybody but the government. Is anybody buying this? So, first of all, here's the big picture. The big picture is that a handful of government ministers have publicly declared, and they didn't do it very quickly, that they take responsibility what happened, and it's the government's responsibility, but not a single one of them resigned. So taking responsibility is not exactly, it's very nice that people said take responsibility, but they didn't actually act on it. The chief of staff of the IDF and the head of the Shin Bet and the head of military intelligence have all taken public responsibility and said, when this war is over, we're going home. We're going to be, it's on us. Okay. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not taken any responsibility. There are some on the right who are throwing around these things of accusing, Oslo and Rabin and so on and so forth. There are a few ministers in the government as well. It's not making traction with the general public. It may be making traction with some on the extreme right, but as I mentioned previously, the center right, many of the voters of Likud, Netanyahu's party, are very angry at him, very angry at the ministers from their party, and that's the direction things are going right now. Okay, and that's important to say. How are we doing here for time? Okay, let me see, not too well. Okay, I'm going to do these very, very quickly. Lori's asking, there's been a lot of criticism about Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he hasn't directly addressed Israeli citizens in Hebrew. That's not correct, by the way. He hasn't done a lot of it, but he's done it once or twice. I think twice. Look, the fact on the ground is that the Prime Minister has not visited and met with the majority of the evacuees from the south, the bereaved families whose members were murdered, and most of the captives' families as well. Okay, he hasn't done that. I don't want to go into why. I'm not going to go into the why of that, because that's already making a political opinion or statement. I can say what is. And the reality is that Bibi has not done that. And he hasn't shown, as far as the public is concerned, empathy. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it at that. There were two more questions, and I want to run into my last one, because a lot of the questions coming in now are speaking to my last one. Are hospitals and healthcare, Nancy's asking, are hospitals, healthcare compromised in Israel, equipment message? Not yet, no. The answer is no. Okay, as Israel used the new lasers to shoot Hamas rockets, Bob's asking, the answer is not, it's not operational yet. Bob, when this broke out, it's theoretically it was supposed to be operational another year and a half or 2 years. There have been all kinds of rumors inside of Israel that we're trying it out. I'm not sure there's anything really beyond that, to be honest with you. But no, as far as I know, we haven't been using that at all. Okay, so for the last piece, folks, and I'll take questions after the last piece. And I know that the last piece is something that many of you are interested in. So back to the presentation, your permission. Wait a second, here we go. Yes, okay. At this point, you should be seeing this. I think we have to be very aware of the fact that Hamas militarily, as such, militarily does not constitute an existential threat for Israel. Okay? Hamas has, I don't know, maybe as many as 30,000 fighters. Okay. I don't know, 10 to 15,000 rockets. Beginning, I don't know how many they have left. Okay. They don't pose an existential threat militarily. What they've succeeded in doing is really terrorize us in a very, very sophisticated way with those films. And we may end up getting other enemies that are more problematic dragged into this. And here, what you have in front of you is the focus on a different enemy. And this is also not an existential threat, but this is without a doubt a strategic threat for Israel, without a doubt. And here we're talking about Hezbollah. Now, aware of the fact that this may be too small for you, so I'm going to try to blow this up for you, the screen, so you have a better sense of this. And I'm going to start with what Hezbollah has in its arsenal. You should see it now blown up over here. So Israeli, this by the way, you see over here came out 3 days ago, what I'm showing here. But these are Israeli estimates. Israel estimates that Hezbollah, okay, Iranian Shiite proxy that's sitting in southern Lebanon, has about 150,000 missiles and rockets and other projectiles. By the way, the US estimates is 200,000. That's interesting. But what I want you to look at here, which is a bit more important, are the types. When you look at the missiles, which is kind of in the middle here, I'll try to show it with my cursor. Look at the missiles, okay? Look at the ranges here. And I know a lot of you, the kilometers don't mean very much. In a second, I'm going to show you on a map what it means, okay? But I can guarantee you that 160 kilometers, okay, they have tens of thousands, can probably just reach me in Jerusalem, okay? 210 kilometers, you're already, in the northern Negev. And 300 kilometers, you're covering, 3/4 of the country. Now, when we take a look at what my cursor is right now, the word has 600 kilograms. Multiply that by 2.2 to get the poundage on that, right? So that's a lot. And they have tens of thousands. The deal here is that a 600 kilogram warhead has the payload to take my whole house on top of my head, to drop it on my head, meaning the fortified safe room that I have, which will protect me from a Hamas rocket or missile if it hits my place, if I'm inside, will not protect me if Hezbollah shoots at me with something with 600 kilogram warhead. Some unknown number, probably in the thousands, but not beyond that, not above 10,000, of the heavy payload missiles have GPS, very high precision guidance systems. In other words, if Hezbollah enters this fray full steam, the operative meaning is they're going to do their darndest to take out our Air Force airfields, power stations, desalination plants, international airport, and maybe the government as well. They're also going to be shooting a huge amount of rockets on highly populated cities. My guess is probably the two cities that'll be on the biggest receiving end will be Haifa and Tel Aviv. And Probably West Jerusalem, where I live, will be also on some receiving end. It's very clear that if Hezbollah enters the fray, first of all, the Israeli home front is going to be hit in ways it's never been hit before, not even in 1948. We're going to sustain thousands of casualties, civilians, okay? And we're going to sustain a lot of economic damage. We're also probably going to destroy Lebanon as a country. What the United States has done with its aircraft carrier force, and another one's heading the direction, are the following three things. Number one, sends a signal to Iran and to Hezbollah that they're not just going to face, that if Iran and Hezbollah enter this, they're not just facing Israel, they're going to be facing the United States of America. Number one. Number two, Israel and the United States, for at least a decade now, every single year, have been practicing a kind of a joint missile defense command, because the U.S. systems, the missile defense systems and the Israeli systems are not identical. They're different. They're two different systems, and there's a lot of coordination, and the two militaries know how to do it very well. There was actually a very, very big exercise of this a few months ago, like 2 months ago or something like that, maybe less than that, between the U.S. And Israeli military. So the second issue is that some of the U.S. missile defense systems will be used also to defend Israel. And by the way, we saw it a few days ago when the Houthis, who are Shiite Yemeni insurgents, proxies of Iran, shot missiles and a whole swarm of drones in Israel's direction. And the U.S. destroyer that was sent, I mean, it was intelligence at the time, was in the region, and it was 9 hours, shot down all of them that were heading towards Israel, not towards the United States. Okay, so again, the second issue, as I said, is that part of the U.S. missile defense systems that are part of the two aircraft carrier strike forces will be used to also defend Israel, and you got a lot of planes, a lot of fighter planes there that can also, if need be, also run sorties, okay, and bolster the Israeli capacity. And there's also F-35. So that's a very, very strong message, and it's also unprecedented. The United States never did that ever for Israel before, and I'm scratching my head thinking, well, who the U.S. did it for anybody before this moment? And this is probably restraining Iran. I would say almost for sure restraining Iran, might be restraining Hezbollah. And it's basically giving Israel the breathing room and the time to take care of Hamas. Now, I want to make this very clear to you. If the United States was not present, Israel could take care of both or all three or all four, a multi front war. We could take it and survive. We could do it. We would take a lot of casualties, civilian casualties, and especially if Iran jumped in, we may have to use a weapon we really don't want to use. Okay, the fact the United States is shouldering with us is very, very significant, because it's restraining and it's deterring. The right term is deterring Iran and Hezbollah, although Hezbollah has been shooting every day. Rockets mostly at Israeli military positions, but also at some civilian positions. And but I think 7 Israeli servicemen have been killed, 48 Hezbollah terrorists have been killed. Okay, squads that were shooting, we took out every squad that shot at us has been taken out. Okay, so it's been kind of like on a low flame there, but that can, either side can make a mistake and can inflame that, and we're trying very hard not to. So this is one issue. Now, getting back to where we are at hand, we have to be very honest and very clear that Israel has two terrible dilemmas. The first one is there are 220 captives, hostages, in the hands of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other groups in the Gaza Strip. Some of the captives are not Israeli citizens. Some of them are, and some of them are not Jewish, by the way. Some of them are dual citizens, like myself. I'm not a captive, but Israeli and American. Okay, so you have Americans who are there, who are both American and Israeli. You have French who are there, who are Israeli and French. You have a whole slew of dual nationals being held there as well. And we've never faced a situation where so many people were held captive by an enemy, by terrorists, by a non-state actor. Never had that. Where the overwhelming majority are civilians and not military personnel. And we're talking about at least 30 children. And I think something like, what's the last number? I think something like 12 people over the age of 70. Okay. Where we've never faced this before. It means a lot of internal pressure from the families. And it's a moral and ethical question. It's a legal question. What responsibilities does the state have to its citizens? And it's a huge problem. I personally believe that the bombing that we're doing right now probably is not killing the captives. The Hamas has, as I said before, 500 miles of tunnels deep under the ground. And the 84-year-old who was released yesterday said that she was dragged into a spider web deep under the ground. I mean, it's just, Hamas has a vested interest in holding these captives alive, okay, because they want to use them as bargaining chips and for public opinion. I think it's very important for all of us to take a deep breath and understand that Hamas are rational players. They're rational players. They are Islamo-Nazis or Islamo-fascists. They are terrorists, but they are rational players. And everything they do has a goal attached to it, has an aim. It's very important for us to take a deep breath and remember that. Very, very important for all of us. You, me here, and the government of Israel and the IDF. So we have this terrible dilemma about the captives, and we have the other terrible dilemma, it's more than two, actually, of the collateral damage. You've got, close to 2.5 million civilians, Gazans. For sure, most of them are not culpable for what happened here. Certainly babies aren't, children aren't. We're talking about non-combatants. And we have a dual dilemma there. The dual dilemma is we are moral people, and we do not want to kill non-combatants, okay, for sure. But we also have an enemy that's using them as human shields, and there's almost no other way of getting our people back and of deterring or re-deterring Hamas than what we're doing right now. The third dilemma is that the kind of urban warfare that Israel would have to fight in the Gaza Strip is on a level of something that may have never been done before in modern history. And I'm quoting now several American generals who fought in Mosul. They fought urban warfare in 2014, 2015 against ISIS. I'm talking about people who the combination of the population that's there, civilian population, 500 miles of underground tunnels, the rubble in the buildings, and the fact that Hamas been planning this for years. There's lots of surprises for us. And to be honest with you, the fact that Israel is not expert, not at tunnel fighting, not at urban warfare. Operationally, in terms of operational experience, we don't have that much operational experience in urban warfare, and we have very little in tunnel warfare, only in 2014, and it wasn't that extensive. And so, with all the training, all the technology, everything we do, it's very clear that we may end up going in there and, yeah, at the end of the day, we'll be successful militarily. We may lose a hell of a lot of military personnel of our own. But I guess the biggest dilemma is that we don't have, as far as I can tell, an end game plan. We don't have a solution because many of the solutions that Israelis, pundits, intellectuals, political scientists, some politicians fantasize about are just fantasies. For example, that Egypt will absorb. Egypt won't absorb. They don't want them. Or Jordan, no, Jordan won't absorb them. Jordan doesn't want them. Or the international community, they don't want it. Nobody wants our problems. Nobody wants the problems of the Gazans. Nobody wants them. Nobody's going to solve it for us. And yes, they also brought it on Egypt, but that's a fantasy of ours. That's not actually part of any kind of reality. We don't have a day after plan. For sure, the last three governments have done their utmost to weaken the Palestinian Authority. And now to say, oh, the Palestinian Authority will go there, the Palestinian Authority is completely dysfunctional and probably wouldn't be able to run the show there. So we don't really have, and we don't want to be back there running the show. That's a quagmire. So part of the problem is we don't have an end game. And that's a big, big problem. It's a big, big problem. It's not entirely clear that the military goals have been sharpened and enunciated, because you have all kinds of public declarations, which are a combination of the need to kind of bolster the Israeli citizen's psyche that's been damaged now in terms of security, that plus bravado, plus rage. We're going to crush, we're going to defeat, we're going to uproot, but all these different. I wish they'd stop talking. I wish our politicians and generals would stop talking about what we're going to do. Just do. Stop talking. That's my own personal opinion. Okay, it's getting Israelis more edgy and more nervous. But is the idea militarily to degrade very, very dramatically, significantly Hamas's military capacity? And then what? Let's say we can do that. Is it to topple their regime? And then who's replacing them? Okay. What? We haven't heard. We're hearing different things being expressed by different political leaders here. It's not entirely clear, what, and an army has to, all wars have to have a political aim, a political goal at the end of them. You don't just fight just to fight. There has to be some kind of political goal here, and it has to be enunciated. And if you achieve it, you won. If you didn't achieve it, you didn't win, right? So you win all the battles, but if you didn't achieve your political goal, you lost. Okay, you want a good example? Think about the Vietnam War. We won all the battles, but we lost the war. Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't want to go down that road right now. But the bottom line is that we're in a terrible dilemma here, and yeah, there's also a real sense of lack of personal security here, as I mentioned before, and it's not improving. Let me go take a look at the questions that have been thrown in here, so I can be a bit more focused in what I'm talking about. And I'm actually going to go back to previously because I skipped over, and those who asked it earlier on deserve to get their answers. Okay. What do I predict is the plan day after? I'm not a prophet, and I don't know. What will happen in Gaza once Hamas is decimated? In my opinion, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'll say the following: if it's possible, okay, to have a lot of stakeholders and players getting involved in building something alternative, which would mean Israel and Egypt, starting with Israel and Egypt and continuing on with maybe parts of the Arab League and continuing with maybe EU and the US. I don't know, but it's very hard for me to perceive. It's hard for me at this moment to perceive that happening. I could be wrong, but I don't see that happening. And so the answer is I really don't know. How is Hamas being funded? Hamas is funded by Qatar. Hamas is funded by Iran. Previous head of the Mossad thinks it's a mistake to go into Gaza. Do I agree? I think that we have no choice but to go into Gaza. The question is how we do it. If we're going to be doing precision operations with good intel, whose purpose is to kill as many Hamas fighters and as many Hamas commanders and leaders as possible, and they're not mutually exclusive, to try to rescue captives, okay? And that might take a year, more than that. Yeah, I can see us doing that, but that does not mean conquering the whole country, okay? I think we have no choice but to go in. And let me make it clear. If we are unable to rebuild our strategic deterrence against Iran and against Hezbollah and against all kinds of bad guys in Syria, okay, who start shooting us as well, and against Hamas, if we cannot reinstitute our strategic deterrence, we're going to be in a very bad place nationally. Okay, and there's no question that Hamas has to be beaten down. Is it possible to topple them? I don't know. The question is, what's the cost? Is it possible to dramatically degrade their military capacity? I'm sure it's possible. The question is, what is the cost? And look, let me say one more thing that you all know this intuitively, but it's a fact. In Israel's short 75 years of history, every war or conflict we've had, the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. And as we move forward from 1948 till today, the clock ticks faster. The amount of time we have to do what I have to do is always getting shorter and shorter. Now, having said that, it's very clear that the events of October 7th will force Israel, come what may, to do something dramatic militarily. Because if not, both for the military and for the government, this is a to be or not to be moment. And even if we lose allies and we lose support of countries that now are supportive of us, we're going to have to, we may have to do that no matter what. Having said that, I think, and I don't know what the magic number is, there is some number of civilian casualties in Gaza that once we pass it, we're going to find ourselves in deep trouble internationally. Okay? And I don't know what the magic number is. And by the way, obviously it's a dual standard, because think about what happened in Syria. Okay, how many people were killed there? How many people became refugees? Think about. I can give you so many examples. Think about Ukraine. Okay, I give a lot of examples, but there's always a dual standard with Israel. And listen, we're not Russia, and we're not the U.S. We are a regional power, and we're a tiny country, and we have limits. We have our economic and military limits, and and those limits will also inform, to a certain extent, how far we can go with this. Okay, what else do we have? Do I think Israel's delaying ground invasion until Hamas terrorists run out of supplies and have to come out of the tunnels? Bob, they're never going to run out of supplies. They've been planning this for years. There's 500 miles of tunnels. They've got lots of supplies. If the question is, why do I think that we are delaying a ground, use the term ground invasion, Bob, I'm going to use the term land maneuver, which is the term that's being used in Israel, not ground invasion. And the terminology is significant. I think that three things are informing the delay. Number one, I think there was an informal request by the U.S. to let the negotiations that are taking place right now play out, see if more captives or hostages can be released. And it's not just the U.S., because there are other nationals being held. That's number one. I don't think it was a diktat or a demand. I think it was an informal request. Number one. Number two, I think that the Israeli army is aware of the complexity of the urban warfare that they have to engage in. And probably, I'm guessing now, that the advice they're getting and consultants they're getting from American experts who did this, okay, not too long ago, is also giving the Israeli army pause. Not that they're not going to go in, but rather maybe tighten up some things and things some things through. And finally, I think that the Israeli government, particularly a prime minister, doesn't have faith in the capacity of the Israeli army to do the urban warfare without losing a huge amount of people. And I think that he's all the time thinking about his legacy and also the public opinion about him. And it's part and parcel. If you look at Netanyahu's record, he's been in power for 16 years, not consecutively. He is astute. He is astute. He's really tried to stay away from wars and these kind of land maneuvers. It's completely against his DNA in terms of how he perceives Israel's use of power and its capacity to use power, and he's definitely restraining over here. He's restraining it as well. So I believe that those are the delays, but the delay will not be for long. I think that the army can almost not delay it forever for both technical logistical reasons, but also because of public opinion. What else do we have here? Do I believe that Hamas can be defeated? Very interesting question. I'm not sure I know how to define victory or defeat in this context. And I'm not being cheeky. Theoretically, I suppose that every last Hamas terrorist and leader could be killed. It's a matter of time and intel. And theoretically, we could so degrade their fighting capacity that they won't be so relevant. But Hamas is not just an organization. There's an ideology there, and the ideology will not die out. It will simply spin off. Think about what happened. ISIS was an outgrowth of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was defeated, and ISIS appeared in its stead, by and large. Okay, so Hamas. I don't know what victory and defeat looks like in this case. I really don't. So I don't have a good answer. I am sure that Hezbollah can be defeated, by the way, because Hezbollah is unpopular for sure in Lebanon, and there are also Shiites in Lebanon that don't like Hezbollah, and I think that Hezbollah is their actions and their ideology, particularly if they go on a full out war with us, and what that will cost Lebanon, they can be defeated. Hezbollah can be defeated. Hamas is something else. It's not the same as Hezbollah. It's not the same. So there's a question here about I guess the core of the question here is just how much are the Gaza and Palestinian population supportive of Hamas? The majority of the researchers, whether it's academics or intelligence, even public opinion surveyors, the majority say that the majority of the Gazans are not supportive of what Hamas did, not necessarily supportive of Hamas itself. It's not a democracy. They can't protest or oppose Hamas. They do, they die. And that's also true of, let's say, trying to take public opinion surveys. And yet, it appears that evidently the majority of Gazans probably not, because by the way, the result is they, as civilian population, pay the price. They pay the price. Now, having said all that, I want to make something unequivocally clear. When Hamas led the charge at 6:30 in the morning on October 7th, in their and Islamic Jihad's wake were hundreds of run-of-the-mill Gazans who entered as well and also murdered, raped, and did all kinds of atrocities. And they're not members of Hamas or Islamic Jihad. So there are folks out there, for sure, that hate us as much as, okay, Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And it has to also be said, honestly, that Hamas has had a generation of time to embed their genocidal, anti-Semitic, Islamic ideology from the cradle upwards. They run the schools, they run the mosques, they run everything there. And they've been systematically poisoning the people there against us. And that's a reality. That's a reality. But it's very hard to quantify how many Gazan civilians, are pro-Hamas. By the way, I think both in terms of international humanitarian law and even general morals and ethics, until a moment that somebody actually takes the action, it doesn't matter what's in their heads. If they haven't done one of these atrocities, they're innocent. Okay, they're still non-combatants and civilians until they do the atrocity. Okay, it doesn't matter what, if they like me, don't like me, hate me, don't hate me, dream about killing me or not. If they didn't do the act, it's as far as the law perceives it, and based on moral ethics, they're innocent until proven guilty, and that's just a reality that we have to live with. Okay. All right. It's getting late here, not by you, but by me. So I'm going to very briefly answer a few more questions, and we'll call it a night. Now it's 10:35 and I'm past my bedtime. What's the most important thing those of you outside of Israel can do to help Israel? Speak truth to power. First of all, I assume, but it might be erroneous, that there are decent, reasonable, misguided people who simply don't understand what happened on October 7th. And if they did understand it, if they're decent and reasonable, could not in any way, shape, or form legitimize it. Okay, that's number one. Number two, more importantly, those of you who are citizens of the United States, those of you who are, no, doesn't matter U.S., those of you who are supportive of Israel, you need to canvass if you're living in democracies, and I assume everybody in this is, you need to canvass your representatives. If you're Americans, it's your Congress people or your senators, okay, and your local politicians, okay, and ensure that they're supportive of Israel and apply pressure. I think what began in the United States of pushing back against the academy, against all kinds of elite schools and not elite schools that either allowed anti-Semitic declarations either by their staff, by professors, or by students, and the pushback, be part of that. It seemed that, listen, at the end of the day, those institutions, they need money, and that's their lifeblood. And at the end of the day, not because they're moral, because they're obviously immoral if they allow these things to happen on campus, they can also be restrained. Here's something else, especially if you're not just Americans, but I'm speaking now specifically Americans. There should not be a situation where a student, whether he or she is Jewish or otherwise, should feel unsafe on their campus, either because they support Israel or because they have to be a Jewish person. That's unacceptable. And that's something that as citizens, as parents, as grandparents, okay, you need to apply huge amount of pressure on university campuses, college campuses, where you know it's taking place, and force them to create safe spaces for their kids, for all the students. That's unacceptable. Okay, and you have the power to do it, especially in the United States and Canada, in democracies. I know you have the power to do that. Yeah, that's my short answer to that question. Okay, I'm gonna take the last two right now. Not the last two on the list, but the last two I see in front of me because it's getting late. They're all great questions, but they demand good answers, and I don't have the time. I apologize. Well, this is not going to be the last presentation I'll be doing, or presentation that will be done for Class Without Borders. So, Bob's asking me to comment on the belief that Jewish people in the IDF value life, but Islamic fighters value martyrdom. I want to rephrase. I want to reframe the issue, Bob, with your permission. In principle, the value of life is the highest principle of all three of the monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Question is what is done by the so-called adherents, and I think it's very important. And I'm not being politically correct. Okay, I already, those who were here from the beginning, I told you that I have two friends who are Muslim Palestinians who expressed horror and sorrow within 24 hours. Okay, to me, by what was done by Hamas. And it's got to be very, very clear that in theory, everything that was done, the murder of innocent babies, rape, all these things are not supposed to be. Mainstream Islam is against that. Okay, they're radicals. You have radicals there, and I'm not giving them any kind of a free pass at all. How to quantify them, I don't know. But the reality of the ground is that Hamas, for sure, value martyrdom more than they value life. Either their lives, the lives of their people, and certainly our lives mean nothing to them. Judaism puts a very high premium on life. Life trumps virtually almost everything. It's the IDF tries very hard to minimize collateral damage, to minimize the killing of innocents. And it's part of the ethical code, the official ethical code of the IDF. Now, it doesn't mean that all Jews behave morally and ethically, or all Israeli soldiers do, okay? Because Jews, just like everybody else, even more so. So, yeah, we have bad apples here too. But the big picture is that the Jewish people at large, and the IDF in particular, do value life, and we try to practice that. Right now, we're in a very, very bad place where it's almost impossible to do that, but we're still trying to do it. Okay, last question. You, Avi, say that Hamas is rational, and so many people pleading for ceasefire, yet even if they agree to ceasefire, how can we trust that? They don't abide by international law. So, Erica, first of all, we are not interested in the ceasefire. And Israel is not under pressure from the US, UK, France, Germany to call for a ceasefire. Generally speaking, we have two kinds of players that are calling for a ceasefire. Either pro-Hamas or on the fence, don't care either way. But none of the countries that are supportive of Israel are calling for a ceasefire. Absolutely not. There have been calls for temporary, not even ceasefires, to create humanitarian corridors, to give negotiations a chance, but we're not being told to have ceasefire, and it's a non-issue. Yes, Hamas does not abide by international law, but we had truces and ceasefires them over the course of many years. They just broke one, obviously, so not particularly trustworthy. But no, Israel is not interested in a ceasefire with Hamas, and Israel is not going to stop fighting Hamas. The question is how we're going to do it. Whether it's going to be something very, very long, and as I said, incisive, okay, with decisions, okay, very, very precise going in, or is it going to be something dramatic now with invasion and a lot of people dying? Okay, look, folks, the questions are excellent. I want to thank you. I want to thank you also because it's not easy to be on a Zoom for, gee whiz, it's been now for an hour and 45 minutes. I don't know how you lasted this long, but kudos to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those of you who are supportive of Israel. And by the way, those of you who are not Jewish, you should think about being supportive of your Jewish co-citizens and friends and neighbors who are experiencing a lot of anti-Semitism right now. Okay, they're your friends, they're your neighbors, they're your co-workers, co-citizens, and they shouldn't be left to stand alone. Any decent, reasonable person should call out anti-Semitism and stand up against it. Just like any decent, reasonable person should call out racism against anybody or harm done to anybody. So this is what we're about here in Classrooms Without Borders, but this is also what people should do. And those of you who are Jewish, seek out allies. There are more people than you think that will work shoulder to shoulder with you, who care. Don't think everybody is against the Jews or everybody's against Israel. Seek out allies, you will find them. Peace and love, folks. Wish me luck, please.
Thank you, Avi. I would like to express our appreciation to Avi for his invaluable updates. Of course, your words today resonated with all of us. As we navigate through these trying moments, we remain committed to staying informed and connected. Please join us again next Wednesday at the same time and through the same Zoom link, so no need to re-register as we will continue this series. In recognition for the ongoing situation and the resilience of the Israeli people, we are pleased to announce a new series starting on Mondays, Reflections from the Israeli Homefront 2023, facilitated by Rabbi Jonty Blackman. I just dropped the link in the chat for you, so you'll find it there, and you'll also find it on our event page. This series will provide an opportunity for us to reflect on the experiences of those on the Israeli Homefront during these times of adversity, offering fresh perspectives and deepening our understanding. We extend gratitude for all of you for your active participation today and your support. Together, we can work towards building bridges of understanding and empathy during these testing times. As always, if you would like to help us support our mission, please visit our website to donate online. And with that, I will formally close this out for today. Bye, everyone, and stay safe.